just never thought of it as a viable option for me. I was very happy in corporate America because it's an institution and it has rules of engagement, and I had prided myself on knowing those rules, and quite honestly, I had felt like I had shaped a career for myself. I think the pandemic was an interesting one because during that time I realized that I wanted to spend more time on the things that I really was interested in, and that happened to be technology. Like I'm an engineer at heart.
Hey, welcome back. Another episode of McKinney Momentum. Whether you're watching this on YouTube or listening on your favorite platform, would love it if you would give us a follow, subscribe to the YouTube channel, however you consume this. Would love to know that you're out there listening. If you'll comment, engage with us. We'd love to bring this resource to connect with and engage with the community of McKinney overall. Today's episode is a good one, and I say that about every episode because they all are. But we sit down today with our Senior Vice President, Michael Talley. Michael came to the McKinney EDC from Denton County, previously from Keene, a small town, and has been with the organization for about a year and a half and has been tremendously instrumental in furthering programs like the Innovation Fund and just bringing some connections and some relationships and deepening the strength of our economic development community here in McKinney. And he hosts our guest today, Ranjith Raghunath, who leads a company called CX Data Labs. Now, Ranjith is interesting because he has a huge tech background with companies like Samsung. He worked with Amazon, particularly developing the technology behind the Alexa device. And sorry if me saying that set off an Alexa near you, but he was a part of that team. And so he brings to McKinney a tremendous background of technology, data, analytics, and just he has an incredible mind when it comes to researching the data that's available to us as business owners, as leaders in the community, what's out there accessible as consumer data, and how do we leverage that to grow our business. And now he leads a company doing that very thing. CX Data Labs is a part of our Innovation Fund. They're located here in McKinney, and I think you'll see a lot of interesting things. This conversation is gonna challenge you. It's some very deep concepts, some very technological things, but at the same time, very approachable and very engageable things that we can connect with on an everyday level. So I hope you enjoy this episode with Michael Talley and Ranjith Raghunath. Alexa, play the next episode of McKinney Momentum.
Well, let's just go ahead and jump in and kind of give us your background and where you started education-wise and how you ended up
Yeah,
in McKinney.
happy to. Yeah, so I was born in India, left when I was roughly 5 years old, moved over to Saudi Arabia. My dad was an executive over at Marriott, so that took me to different places. So we spent some time in Oman, in the UAE, Dubai before it really erupted, and then moved over to San Antonio, Texas. So was 17 when I went to St. Anthony Catholic School there, and then did my bachelor's in engineering at the University of Texas, San Antonio. And then, worked there for a while with a company called USAA. Never thought I would actually go into corporate America. I was actually walking the hallways with one of my buddies who was actually looking for a job. I happened to talk to some folks there and didn't really know what an insurance company could do with an engineer. So that was my first conversation with them, which is, do you hire engineers? And they were like, yes, obviously we do. That's why we're talking to you. So yeah, and so that took a life of its own. So I ended up doing that and spent some time at Whataburger, and then moved over to the DFW area with Samsung really. And then worked at GSK, and then ended up staying here. Decided to stay here really when I was with Amazon, and then opened up CX Data Labs. And then, given all the background with DFW and the kids growing up, I said, you know what, McKinney's a great place. So just ended up staying. And then now run the business as well as teach at SMU. So that's my background. That's my story. Yeah, somewhere in there, I also went to graduate school at MIT. So even during that time, I stayed in Dallas. I would just travel back and forth. So.
Oh, so you were doing that?
Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Remote, hybrid?
So it was
All of the
hybrid.
above?
It was hybrid. So it was an executive MBA program. It lasted roughly 2 years. So every 2 weeks I would go up there for a weekend, and every 6 months I had to be up there for 10 days.
Okay.
So I got to see Boston quite a bit, and then get to know the aircraft crew as well that would fly down from here to Boston.
All right.
And so yeah. So I had fun times. Collected a lot of miles.
Yeah.
So the kids were super happy during summer. We got upgrades. So yeah. I mean that was pretty much it.
So I know we've talked a little bit about this in the past, but talk a little bit about your experience at Amazon and what you did there, and then because I think that was right before CX started, correct?
Yeah. So happy to do that. So at Amazon, I spent time within Alexa, the artificial AI intelligent being encompassed into these devices. And my job there pretty much was to take all of the data that was being collected across various different screens, devices, and bring them in together and munch them in a way that you could run business operations off of that, right? So what does that really mean?
Mm-hmm.
What that means is you as a business operator, which in this case, in the form of Alexa, would be, yeah, I run this particular set of features. I want to make an investment decision in this feature versus not. I want to drive more engaging experiences. So you typically look at data. And so in order for you to either support or negate your hypotheses, so you would go through and utilize the data that we would collect from all of these different places to kind of go through and make those propositions. But then in addition to that, the products that we built internally would also help you understand what kind of customer experience you're delivering to your customers, right? And Amazon being kind of like the seminal poster child, so to speak, of being so customer centric. It was the middle of that universe, right? And so I got tons of exposure into like how they think about problems, the different mechanisms that they use. Also was really blessed to kind of be around a different set of people that really taught me about the fact that it isn't about dotting the I's and crossing the T's, more so than like, just kind of looking at it as a business and running it as a business. And I think that was very, very interesting, because going into Amazon, I thought it was a tech company, which it is.
Mm-hmm.
But I think more than anything else, what it is it's a well-oiled machine that's focused on running a business. Right. And that was a great learning.
That sells
for me
books. Right.
Yeah. I mean, like, if you think about it, like, they were in books first, right? And they kind of just erupted out. So yeah, they were.
I don't think everyone truly knows. Of course, a lot of tech in most people's worlds that they use daily, they don't truly know, including myself, how everything works behind the scenes. We think of Amazon a lot of times. The normal everyday consumer is that that's where I can order stuff and get it the same day or the next day, and you don't think about maybe AWS or those types of services that they do for businesses all across the world, essentially. So it's just kind of interesting for you to dive into that a little bit. But talk to me about how that led to CX and you getting involved or starting that off, really.
Yeah. So happy to do that. I mean, I think the journey for me kind of sort of with the inception of CX actually started like years before that. So I'd been at several different companies leading up to Amazon. One of them was actually Samsung. The other was GSK. And every time I would, we would venture out into a project, what I would discover is that the consultants that we would hire would either be too strategic, which would be super high level, or they would be uber tactical, right? Which is tell me the bits and bytes to move, and I would do that for you. And so what I discovered was there weren't really a lot of players in the middle that really deciphered what was being heard, what was being said, and what it meant. Mm-hmm. And to me, that kind of became a call to action to say, well, how do we solve that problem? So that was one. And then the other was actually just this hypothesis around customer experience backed business processes. A lot of people talk about it. I think oftentimes when they go through and rendition or bring it to life, they go and talk to people, right? And talking to people is great. And while that's fantastic, like part of it is, you have customers leaving behind digital footprints on your real estate, so to speak, on your digital estate every day. So how do you harness that and bring that together and go through and drive value? And one of the things that I've discovered, working in these large-scale organizations, is it's hard to do. And the reason why it's hard to do is people take their business processes and they specialize it in one aspect or the other. And as a result of specialization, right, integration becomes hard. Right? It's kind of like when you put blinders on a horse, it's like not going to have that peripheral vision. And that's by design. And so now you have what finance folks need to do with accounting books, which is, reverse engineer that and unpack it to kind of find what the true value is versus book value, right? So that's the kind of stuff that data engineering and that aspect of science would need to do. And so what I recognized was another opportunity that said, okay, for CX-backed business processes to truly understand it and unpack it, it's a data integration, data science problem. So that's one way that you can close the loop, right? And so that motivation, along with the fact that you didn't have a lot of consulting companies, in my opinion, that were focused on kind of the three segments that I talked about, like deciphering between what was heard and what was said and what it meant, that I said, I think we have a market here. Let's go and try it out and let's see where it goes. And a year and a half later, here we are.
So were you really just, with CX, are you really just opening people's eyes to all the data they could be taking in and to where they can utilize that? Because I think that's a problem with a lot of companies nowadays. They don't even realize what they're capturing. And then, okay, when you do realize what you're capturing, how are you taking that data and building a story with it? And we do that a lot in economic development, but you're working with companies kind of all across the board, probably.
Yeah, so we've got some fairly large Fortune 500 clients within our roster. And I think the key is that they are collecting tons of information about customers, right? And like many other places do, and I think the challenge at many times isn't the fact that we're passively collecting that information. The challenge is like, how do we utilize it in a manner that we can actively engage with them on, right? So many times, even if you think about like an e-commerce channel, right? Like when you start perusing a site for diapers, for example, and you've never perused it for diapers, there's a life event coming, right?
Right.
So it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that out, right? And if you do that consistently over time, that's what it is. Or if you start taking a look at check amounts and you start seeing 748, well, this is probably where you need to fact check me, but that probably is a Marlboro lights pack, and so you can start formulating these heuristics, right? And so you can start then going to segmenting them appropriately or delivering experiences that they didn't quite ask for, but they would appreciate. And now you have to be careful when you do these things, right? There's a whole aspect of privacy and governance, and also this aspect of being creepy that you need to watch out for. But that to me is the call to action, right? How do you responsibly do it? How do you responsibly harness passive signals and convert them into active, engaging experiences for your customer that adds value to their life? Because no one's going to complain if it adds value to their life.
Right. I actually appreciate when I've looked at something on social media or on a website and it reminds me when I can't remember what I actually looked at earlier. So, I know not everyone's that way, but how was that, that's been a hot topic not just in the U.S. and North America, but all across Europe about privacy. And I know in some countries you're looking into, obviously, making that, putting laws in place to where they can protect the consumers and the residents. Is that impacting what you do?
In fact, it's yes, it has an impact, but I don't think it's a negative one. It's a positive one. So, a couple of things, right? The first thing is I think we've spent a ton of time with a mental model that says data is owned by companies, and it's not. It's owned by the customer. And so, if you think about personalized experiences, right, there's nothing that should stop Michael from taking his preferences that a company has learned about him and taking that to another site or another place so that he can just leverage his experience just as he would have in whatever site that he was on, right?
Right.
So if we add that, so if we put that mental model on the docket, effectively what we're saying is the data is owned by the customer, right? The insights are borrowed by businesses to
Right.
allow for them to service customers in a way that adds value to their life, right? And then they can then choose to take it wherever they want. So I think when you flip it in that kind of narrative, and if you flip it in that kind of framing, then that says, oh gosh, like our systems aren't built that way today, right? And so when you start walking backwards from that vision, yeah, privacy and governance is one part of it. Privacy, the other part is inter exchange between these different places. When I say places, like different sites of operation is another one. Also, like how much of it is relevant versus not is also important, right? Like, I mean, something that you did as a child, right? Is that still relevant to your behavior? I don't think so. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But all those kinds of factors start coming to the surface. So I think this mental model and this shift is something that we're betting on as a company, right? And so, so that's actually helping us quite a bit. It makes this space more nuanced. It makes it more complicated. But I think the exciting part about this whole thing is that's what's right for the customer, right?
Right.
And so, yeah. So I think holistically, it's good for us.
Yeah. What? Let's transition a little bit into McKinney and the EDC, and
Yeah.
I know you've worked with us a little bit on some things and the Innovation Fund. Talk about your experience with that process and what that relationship has been like.
Yeah, it's actually been one that. So firstly, thank you for investing in us. I should probably start off by saying that. We've been a benefactor of the funds that we've been provided. The process was great. I mean, I think honestly, when I started off the conversation, it was about, hey, like we're investing in these product companies that specialize in AI and data. We're obviously not a product company; we're a services company. So the conversation quickly pivoted into, well, what is it that y'all are really trying to do? Which is, we're trying to create. We're trying to provide economic incentives to basically create a market, right? And for me, market is supply meets demand. And I think you have a set of, or we, I should say, have a set of pragmatic players at the table who are willing to listen and take perspective to say, okay, well, regardless of the channel, how can we create those opportunities? And we were able to discuss that openly to say, hey, we're hiring in McKinney, we're trying to pull kids out of, we're trying to provide jobs for experienced individuals as well as for folks out of college. And we're trying to produce products that can be consumed all across the world. And that would be the same thing that you'd be investing in if it were a product company. And oh, by the way, eventually, maybe one day we could do that as well. And so I think just the pragmatism on the table and focused on like what is the end outcome, right? And walking backwards from that rather than being so pedantic on the pathway to get there is something that I appreciated about the process. And so holistically, we're not just glad that we became recipients, but we're also glad that we could help with that growth, and obviously we're biased because we got funded, so I should say that.
Yeah. Okay. Disclaimer.
Yeah, exactly, right? Exactly. You're
Full
going
disclosure
with,
here.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Appreciate that. Well, is this your first company you've started?
Yes,
personally?
It is. Yes.
Did you ever think of yourself growing up that, hey, I'm going to be an entrepreneur. I'm never going to work for anyone, or maybe I will for a while, then go off on my own? Did you ever think that you would?
Never thought that. In fact, even when I was finishing up my MBA, a lot of people were like, hey, well, let's go do this startup together. And we had talked about it, and I had participated in a lot of these kinds of, ideation sessions, or like, these hobbies, as I would call them, on the side, where you go through and delve into it and all of that. Um, I just never thought of it as a viable option for me. I was very happy in corporate America, because it's an institution and it has rules of engagement, and I had prided myself on knowing those rules, and quite honestly, I had felt like I had shaped a career for myself. I think the pandemic was an interesting one, because during that time I realized that I wanted to spend more time on the things that I really was interested in, and that happened to be technology. Like I'm an engineer at heart, and so I wanted to build things, and so that took me to Amazon, and had a wonderful time there. But I think the ultimate calling for me was, and this was one thought that came to me that resonated loud, was I'd moved 5 companies, but my family was the same. Kids were the same. Like
You can't trade those in.
exactly, man. Can't. I mean, even if you pay for them, and so one of the things that I thought about was, well, how do I set something up for myself and the people around me, and build a culture and a nurturing environment that I can coach and teach the people that I love, and work with the people that I love. And that single thought kind of took me down a lot of different pathways, and one of them happened to be this company. And quite honestly, we played around with a lot of concepts. We played around with a virtual restaurant concept, and said, hey, what if we do that? What if we do this? And services just seemed like an easy way for us to get started. And customers are the best way for you to tell if you're doing the right thing or the wrong thing, right? And people pay for the
Right.
service that they value and don't.
That's what they say in the startup world. I mean, we were just in Toronto at Collision last week. Some of the team was, and it was just echoed over and over again about, you really want to find out if you have a product or a service that sells. Go talk to 50 people that might be your potential customers, and find that out, and then go talk to another 50, and just continue that process. So I think you're right about that. What's one of the biggest obstacles you've faced when you started CX?
I think brand notoriety. A lot of times, like we get, or at least I used to get confused that, people talk to you because you're you. But the fact of the matter is, they talk to you because you come from a certain place and have a certain position, a title, and all that good stuff, right? So I think just knowing that, knowing it well, in terms of, hey, here's kind of what we can offer, here's what that means, and kind of knowing that brand is still being built was a pretty important one. That was a big obstacle. Also, there are just some organic hurdles that you face when you try to pitch a lot of large companies. And I'll give you one very, very tactically relevant one. You got to have at least $30,000 in insurance policies, right? Just so that you can go out there and get business. So you haven't even started anything. You haven't even put light fixtures up, right?
Right.
And so I think some of the liability portions of it, you're there, or sometimes you have to go and, for us, when we work with Fortune 500 clients, we're held accountable to certain audit standards. So now you're doing internal audits and external audits. Well, there's another, X amount. So you haven't even gotten out of your garage, and you're
You're still following the corporate rules, essentially.
You have to. You have to, right? And so
Because you want the business with that.
exactly. So I think the big obstacles for us are brand notoriety, trying to get there, right? And then all the things that takes for us to get there.
Yeah.
And so I think that's my biggest thing. And also, quite honestly, you're also, for me, we're flipping roles, right? At one point we were signing, I was signing the checks on the other side, on behalf of somebody, right? Now I'm asking somebody else to provide us with funds to do work on their behalf. So,
But has that previous experience given you some insight into what those people are looking for as well? I mean,
100%. I was actually talking to a VC the other day, and she was asking me if I would sit on a podcast where they were going to talk about the mind of a corporate buyer, right? And so, absolutely. It gave me a ton of insight. So kind of having been in those ranks, you kind of know that initially it starts off with price and with competency, and it ends with trust. Because by the time the filter comes down, it's about who you can trust and work with. because that's what got you into the process to begin with. So yeah, and like like when we deal with large clients, I mean exactly like what they're looking for, like what is like where does procurement fit, where does legal fit. So you kind of know the inside baseball because you had to play those games, to kind of go through and drive stuff forward. So we're well versed in that. The obstacle that I have personally is I've never been a consultant before. So kind of learning out how to figure out and drive that thinking in terms of all of the things that you go through and put on the docket has been new for us. But yeah, that I think is the bigger ordeal. But to answer your question directly, yeah, it's helped us tremendously.
Right.
The mindset of a buyer, right? And
sure.
always, I think one of the things that I'm pretty sure our clients will say the same thing as well, is we've always come at it from a client perspective, So we put stuff on the table that even though we may not monetize on it, we tell them directly, this is not going to benefit us, but if we were you and this was our business, then this is what we would recommend you do. And I think while in the short term that may shut some doors, in the long term, man, they cash that. Yeah. And that's the kind of business that we want to be, honestly.
Can you talk about any of the recent wins? Maybe with, I don't know if you want to name drop.
No, we can't.
I know you can't do that, but maybe
can't. But I mean, I could
something to that nature.
Yeah. I mean, we can absolutely talk about some of the items. I think some aspects that we've done in this space have been with, providing integrations and optimizing business processes, really, in the commercial banking space. We've done that. And so just to kind of set the stage, right? I mean, a lot of times when you call in a bank, whether you're a business owner or you're doing it on the retail side, you're asking for certain services to be performed on your accounts or whatever instruments that you have with that financial institution. And oftentimes there's a slew of activity that happens in the background. And so that slew of activity involves the person that you're talking to doing something on a screen, that person talking to somebody else in the background, them doing something on a screen, and it becomes a daisy chain of effects that ultimately gets shown into your portal of choice, whatever that is, either on your mobile phone or on your desktop, that a change has occurred. So in this case, it could be all the way from a refund on your statement, or an adjustment to a fee that has occurred, or it could be a change of operation that you've kind of been, or a beneficial owner change. That's a good one, right? So we've kind of developed some integrations to help ease the pain there, and the win there for us is that how do we, when you deal with some of these systems, right? They're all legacy, it's kind of like one of the things that I realize is, like when you go to school, right? I mean, everyone says, oh, you got to be in 11th grade if you go to 12th grade, right? And then when you get in 12th grade, okay, well, then you have these prerequisites, but in the real world, man, some things are 20 years old, some things are 5 years old, right? So now imagine that you're explaining calculus the same, you got to explain it in two different ways to a 2-year-old versus a 10-year-old.
Yeah.
So it's very similar for us when we develop integrations. We're developing integration patterns for technology that's 20 years old, right? Interfacing with that versus something that's 5. And so putting that kind of data platform together and then integrating those items, that's been a good win for us. The other has been, using that story and then getting the notoriety with other clients that we've kind of gone in and pitched with. That's been a big win. So we've signed some global brands. So that's been a really big win for us. And we're looking forward, honestly, in the next segments to see how we can take some of those brands and then make them even better from a data strategy, governance, and privacy point of view, using all the knowledge that we have in data. Mm-hmm. So those are some of the other aspects there. The other win for us is also, providing strategies for folks that are on an on-premises environment and showing them the way to the cloud. And the win there for us, honestly, isn't to say, hey, take it from here and move it there, because that anybody can do. But doing it in a way that's cost-effective and also placating the new mental model, right? So when you're in an on-premises environment, you have a fixed cost, right? You've already paid the $10,000 or whatever it is for your server farm. It isn't that cheap, by the way, but I'm just using illustrative numbers. versus in the cloud, you're paying for it as you go, right? So your algos, your software needs to be changed, and so providing those kinds of strategies to healthcare companies so that they can go through and scale that out in an effective manner that drives value for their customers. That's been another win for us. So those would be a couple of the wins that I would highlight. That we've particularly been able to do. The other is also advising work, just in terms of folks coming up and asking us about, how they can utilize data and analytics to scale up their business operations. In fact, in educational institutions, for example, how do you kind of go through and take care of fundraising? What segments do you focus in on versus not? Mm-hmm. Again, like education is not a sector we focus in on, but we do a lot of peripheral work by helping our partners out. And so, providing advice and kind of driving some of that stuff also helps out.
What's next for CX?
Honestly, when I think about that, I'd like us to champion this whole journey about making data more customer-centric and owned by the customer. So for us, if we can be a vanguard for that movement, mm-hmm. and do that on behalf of our clients, both in financial services, retail, and life sciences, that would be primo, right? And that effectively bringing it down to like the 10,000-foot view is taking that thinking and then building out the components needed that we can effectively build a standard, for how you would play this interchange concept out. Would be an effective one that we want to be not just the leaders in, but the trendsetters in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So before we jump in, we're going to do rapid fire. Got some questions for you. Before we jump into that, how can the listeners follow you? If they want to follow the company, follow you personally.
Follow us on LinkedIn. CX Data Labs. I'm on LinkedIn as well. Please, just shoot me a note, add me, follow me, or add me to your page. I think the other thing is we're also a very small company, and so the best way to engage with us is just shoot us a note. And if you're ever in McKinney, stop by our offices. We're happy to, just if you're a techie or if you're in the space of MarTech or if you're doing anything with customer experience-oriented processes and, you ever want to just sit down and chat, it doesn't have to be that you have to pay us for it. We're also just curious souls, so we'd love to hear from you. And just, like I said, if you're ever in McKinney, stop by. We're actually in the same building that y'all are in. But then if you're on the web, just hit us up on LinkedIn, follow our page on LinkedIn, and then if nothing else, just shoot me a note.
Right, okay. All right, let's jump into rapid fire. So don't spend too much time on these. Let's say 5 to 10 seconds max.
Okay, got it. So don't be verbose is what you're saying.
Exactly.
That's going to be tough, man.
Okay, we're ready? Best meal you've ever had?
Roots Chris. Steak.
Oh, wow, that was quick.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. It was on
Have you been to Bob's yet?
I have. I actually like them too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough. What was your first job?
My first job was working at a motel, actually in San Antonio, Texas, as an attendant. Yeah, that was my first job.
Okay. What time of day are you most productive?
Mornings.
How early are we talking?
5:30.
You get up at 5:30 every morning?
Yeah.
And start immediately? It's where the ideas are flowing?
It's where I have uninterrupted flow of thought. And it's not that I'm productive during that time, I must admit. It's where I get an anchor for the rest of my day. So one of the first things I do is I kind of line up the things that I need to do for the rest of the day. Mm-hmm. And then I kind of just anchor in terms of, hey, these are the things that are super important to me that I need to kind of go through and hit out of the park. And that happens all in the morning.
That was my fault. I had a follow-up question. That's my fault. Okay, stuck on a desert island. You can take 3 movies with you.
Oh, this one's easy. Godfather.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, part 1, Inception.
Okay.
And then the third one, probably, Mystic River or Clint Eastwood movie.
All right. Wow, okay. Same question, books.
I think Thinking Fast and Slow, Daniel Kahneman, I think that's a good one. Multipliers, I love that book. And then the third one is anywhere between like Noise by Daniel Kahneman or Five Dysfunctions of a Team.
Okay, yeah, another good one. Bucket list travel destination.
Bhutan.
Bhutan. Have
Yeah.
you been there? Haven't been
I
there?
have not been there.
Okay,
I do want to make it out there though.
okay. That's right next to McKinney, right?
Exactly. It's actually left. If you just exit right here, it's just like
And just
right
keep
at the
going.
end. Yeah, exactly. You'll get there someday.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, you could spend an hour with anyone, living or dead. Who would it be?
I think Warren Buffett
All right.
would be a good one. Yeah.
That's still a possibility with that. Don't they
Yeah.
auction
They do. They
a
do.
dinner with him or a lunch with him every year
Yeah.
for charity?
I think him and like I know you said only one, but like the other one would be Howard Marks. Love his thoughts.
Okay.
Yeah, so a big fan of his memos. So I think that would be the other one.
Okay. If you weren't doing what you're doing with CX, what would you be doing? What did you want to be when you were a kid?
Well, I mean, you don't want to go down that path. You're gonna hear all sorts of nonsense.
Besides a dinosaur, wrangler or whatever, some kids come up with.
I mean, like I wanted to be a bus conductor, man. That was my big hope. So I was like, that's what I want to do. No, I think if I didn't do anything else, I think I would be a cobbler. Like I like putting together stuff. I like that. Yeah.
Okay, and then last question, best advice you've received, whether that be a personal, corporate world, starting your own business.
Yeah. So the best advice I ever received was actually this thing about compounding skills. People talk a lot about compounding money, but I think there's this concept of compounding skills. And I had an old mentor of mine talk to me, and he gave me an example about like playing soccer at the age of 30 versus at the age of 90. And he said you could be practicing every day, but you're probably going to be better, at some point between 30 to 90 than you would be at 90. And then he gave the same example with reading and writing. He said you practice that every day, you're going to be better at 90 than you are today. Obviously, this has a fundamental assumption that you're doing it right.
Right.
But with that, this concept of compounding skills. So the advice there that I got was focus on the compounding skills, and do that really well, and spend a lot of time kind of honing in on that practice. And I think that stayed with me. And in fact, I give people that advice too now a lot. Yeah.
Wow, that is a great piece of advice.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for coming in. Appreciate you being a part of the Innovation Fund and the EDC and spreading the word about what we're doing here, what our initiatives are, and you're obviously a great example of what we're looking to invest in, and hope you continue to grow in McKinney.
Well, I appreciate it. Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. And I mean, one of the things that we want to do as CX is just make sure that we're good stewards of the money that y'all have provided, but then also be good community partners. I think the big thing is, I mean, we had talked a little bit before the interview started about being good players within the marketplace. I think for us, we want to be good suppliers of talent and producers of talent, right? I mean, and then also consumers of that talent, and kind of taking that and matching supply and demand. So yeah, thanks again for the opportunity.
Yeah, great.
I hope that episode was insightful. Like I said, there's some deep concepts there. There was a lot to grasp, a lot to really latch onto when it comes to data analytics. And we're just so proud and impressed with what CX Data Labs is doing here in our community. And we hope that you connect with them and give them a follow on LinkedIn. Again, wherever you're listening to this, whether it's YouTube, Spotify, whatever your preferred platform is of consuming this podcast, we would love it if you would leave us a review, leave us a comment, connect with, engage, subscribe, follow, and be on the lookout for more great content from the McKinney EDC with McKinney Momentum.